Hey folks, it is mid-January. We've finally gotten a spat of winter weather. It's about 5 degrees out right now and pretty windy. But today what I thought I'd talk about is different aspects of hay storage and hay transport. Primarily today I'm going to be talking about round bales. That's what I use mostly. But let's start with, kind of what a lot of people start with small square bales. I do keep a few of those on hand for contingencies. Sometimes it's just real handy to have, 50 pounds of hay already bundled up where you don't need any equipment. You can just carry it or throw it in the back of a side-by-side. You don't need a pitchfork or anything like that. There's large square bales, which there's different sizes of large square bales. There's different advantages and disadvantages to both big and small square bales. One advantage, if you are going to store indoors, is they're very space efficient. Or if you're transporting long distances, same thing, they're very space efficient. If you look at this storage here, you can see the little air gaps. If you were to design it correctly and you put small squares or big squares in there, you can fill in all those air gaps and you're not wasting as much volume inside of that building. The downside, I would say, from a storage perspective, is that you have to store them inside or at the very least tarp them. The flat top on those bales, man, it rains or you get snow melt on top of those will just soak that up like a sponge, and you'll have a ton of spoilage on those from that. And that can be, that can absolutely just ruin entire bales even when that happens. So those are, from a storage perspective, those are the things. From an economics perspective, small squares and big squares around here are both going to be quite a bit more expensive than round bale hay of the same type and the same quality. Round bale hay, alfalfa around here for, mid to high quality alfalfa is going for about 130 to 150 a ton. Large squares are going from 2 to 250 a ton for the same quality levels. And then small squares, they'll hit 300 a ton pretty easily. So economically speaking, the round bales make a lot more sense. Another thing about round bales is you can store them outside, especially if they're net wrapped. You can store them outside without cover. And yeah, there will be some spoilage, there will be some waste, but it's a manageable amount of waste. So we're going to talk about a few different things in this video, but let's go ahead and get the math out of the way up front. So my estimation on a round bale stored outside for a year, if it's stored properly on the very high end, if it's a real wet year, that bale is going to see maybe 5% spoilage. So on a 1,500 pound alfalfa bale, you're going to see about 75 pounds of spoilage. I'm going to use some fake numbers here to make the math easy for me, but you can plug your own numbers into this equation. But that, on the high end, 5%, that's the real number. Realistically, it's probably closer to like 3. We're going to go ahead and say this alpha cost $200 a ton. It didn't, nowhere near that much, but let's say that it did. That's 10 cents a pound. So you're seeing a 1,500 pound round bale, you're saying 75 pounds of spoilage, that's $7.50. It costs you, one way of putting that is it costs you $7.50 to store that round bale outside for a year. This building here, you can store 6 bales of hay in it. The building cost, when I built it 4 or 5 years ago, cost about $3,000 to put up. You can do the math there. How many years it would take if you just stored hay in there all the time, which there isn't always hay in there, how long it would take to pay that off. There's different aspects that go into that. Keep in mind, this building is not, I didn't put it up and then it's instantly worthless. This building can be turned back into cash. It's portable. I could just sell the whole building or I could scrap it out. So you do want to factor in the actual value of that building and its depreciation or appreciation over time. So yeah, that's the basic formula that I would use, and you can plug that into your own math. You can use your own prices for hay. Different types and quality of hay definitely is going to pencil out differently. And if you're in a situation where, like, you have a place and there's like some big barn that's mostly empty anyway, yeah, sure, put the hay in there. Why on earth wouldn't you? But as far as like building a new building and making decisions around that, that's how to pencil those things out and make economical business decisions. For the indoor storage here, I do consider this long-term storage, by the way, like that's what its purpose is. This hay will probably still be here next winter. It'll be the first hay that gets fed next winter. It'll actually come out of here and get stored outside, and then new hay will go in there, and that'll be the long-term storage, drought reserve, various contingencies. So if you are storing round bale hay outside, there are some tips that I have for you, and it's mostly just things to not do. One thing, probably one of the most common things that I see, is people will butt the bales right up against each other, and there won't be any air gap here. You want to leave an air gap, otherwise rain, snow melt comes down here and it pools and it soaks into these bales, and you can see, several inches into the bale, you'll see mold and rot into there from that. You'll notice, these bales are weathered on the outside, but it very quickly turns green. Even on the outside here, at most on the very top here, it might be like an inch of weathering. You're not talking about a lot of loss. On the bottom down here, you've got some of these bales are on pallets. I have the pallets, so why not use them? I didn't go out and buy more pallets or find more pallets to put under the other bales, but if I have them laying around, I'm going to go ahead and use them anyway. That's kind of the same thing. Water comes down in the rain, and we allow it to have some airflow underneath there. Also helps keep the mice out of them. If they're sitting on the ground for a long time, mice will burrow under them and then burrow up into them, and it's kind of gross. At least I don't think there's a serious health risk there, but it's definitely gross and unpleasant. But if you keep them up on pallets, it just it really helps prevent that from happening. Just like on the bales next to each other, in between the bales when they're in a row like this, again, same thing, leave an air gap, keep that airflow between there so water doesn't get stuck there. I will note something, I raise goats. A lot of people say goats will eat anything. No, they won't. They're actually quite a bit more selective than cattle, especially when it comes to hay. That being said, even this pretty weathered stuff on the outside here, the goats will eat most of that. There will be some parts of it that they won't touch. As far as health risks, you can get listeriosis if you feed some really moldy hay. If it's really moldy, I won't. If there is some really moldy spots, I won't feed it. I'll toss it. But we don't see, if you do this right, you don't see big moldy spots. That just doesn't happen. Just like you want to leave some air gaps between bales, you do not want to stack bales like this outside. Same problem. Rain, snow melt gets into this cracks, and you'll have big amounts of waste right where these bales are touching. Same thing will happen down here. These are inside, so you can store them like that. But if those were outside, I would expect to see several inches of real mold, dangerous mold that you need to throw away into the bale here if you store those outside for any serious amount of time. All this hay here, I will mention, was cut in May. It was all stored outside until it was delivered here on Thanksgiving. If you're like me and you're going to be pitchforking hay off of round bales, I do highly recommend setting them on end. It's just a heck of a lot easier. That being said, when you set them on end, you're exposing that flat top to that moisture, any kind of moisture that comes down. So I do recommend getting some cover on them if they're going to be like that for any serious amount of time. If you're feeding a whole bunch of goats in dry lots or whatever in dry lots, you don't need to cover it if it's only going to be out there for 2 or 3 days. But I call this the hay depot. This is where I put bales and throw them out of. Over the course, we don't feed hardly any hay over the summer, so we might have one bale that just sits in there like all summer. So in that case, the roof makes sense, and the sides are actually more about wind. You'd be surprised on a good windy day how much of your bale will just blow away. If you don't want to have to build a big fancy thing like this, and I don't recommend that you do, to start off with, a pallet on the bottom and a tarp on top does pretty good. On this particular one, I didn't use tarp straps or anything. That's just a big old spike. It's about 6 inches long. You just shove it in there. You don't even need a hammer or anything. And that actually holds it on, I think, better than anything else that I've ever tried to use was. If you're wondering, why this one is here, this is a contingency bale, part of a contingency plan. I call it the skid steer won't start bale. If this thing's empty and I'm trying to put a new bale in it and the skid steer won't start, I've got another bale right here. Some of this gets used. We just fork it over the fence into feeders here. We got the billies in this pen. They're fighting over here right now. It's forked into here, but most of the time we're forking it into a cart behind the side-by-side and delivering it to the main band, the nannies on pasture. I mentioned tarping bales earlier to say, if you're setting a round bale on end, or if you're needing to store square bales outside, you definitely want to tarp them. A couple of years ago, more than a couple, several years ago, I did experiment with just putting tarps on a few round bales that were just, I had the tarps and I had the round bales, and they were just sitting on the side, normal storage. Didn't keep doing it, and the reason is I think it was a net negative. Tarps work both ways. You know, there'll be little holes, little micro tears in this tarp that'll let moisture in, and then the moisture can't get back out. You'll have condensation and humidity get in there. The bale itself may still be off-gassing. It's probably not the right term, but net losing moisture, but that moisture can't go anywhere. It just gets trapped between the tarp and the bale. And I actually did see some, not a huge amount, but I did see some surface mold, and didn't think it did anything that was terribly helpful. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about today. You know, if there's one takeaway here, it's that round bales don't need to be stored indoors, and you can, you know, pencil out that math on how much it is costing you to store those bales outdoors versus indoors, and figure out what makes economic sense for your operation. But did talk about a few other things here. Hopefully you got something good out of this video. If you got any questions or comments, throw them down below.